ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa closed the 55th National Conference in Nasrec, south of Johannesburg, by urging party members to fall in line and to embrace the decisions taken by the conference. The president said that the party must remember its central purpose of serving the people and rooting out corruption within its ranks. The conference has adjourned until the 5th of January to complete outstanding work, including the adoption of resolutions stemming from policy discussions. Well, for some analysis, we're now joined on the close of the ANC's 55th National Conference. We're now joined in studio by governance expert and political analyst, Professor William Gumede from the School of Governance at the University of the Witwatersrand. Thanks so much for joining us. Great talking to you. It's been an interesting 5 days. The Culture Minister, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, says that the conference went well. Do you agree with that assessment?
No, thank you for having me here. I think, obviously, from a Ramaphosa point of view, it went very well. I mean, he was re-elected. It was a tender hooks. I mean, even hours before, we didn't know. There's some people, some of his loyalists who publicly changed, you know, hours before the voting. But from the side of the radical economic transformation faction, Dlamini Zuma, their side, I think this was a terrible conference for them. I mean, they were convinced that actually there was a turnaround. Zweli Mkhize would get it. They didn't get it. So I think would be very, very disappointed. They would be very disappointed about the conference.
The markets will have a view, but South Africans watching it all unfold on television, how do they see the ANC at the end of this conference versus going into it? You know,
if the ANC actually has really sown itself to the nation. I mean, we've seen heckling at the conference, we've seen toxic behaviors at a conference, and even, you know, the leadership election, you know, what the ANC needed now was a change broadly in leadership, fresh ideas, younger people, not necessarily younger people in age, but, you know, in thinking and in energy. So we didn't get that at a conference, and I think many people will be disappointed. Thirdly, I mean, we haven't seen the robustness of the policy making at the conference. I mean, the country is really in a crisis around policy. There is very little execution. The state is not failing. You know, rule of law is non-existent in many parts of the country. So we would have, you know, I think ordinary people would have expected, you know, some really clear execution plans coming from the conference. So I think there will be a big disappointment among many non-ANC people.
There potentially were a few landmines, but they seem to have managed it. Whether they swept it under the carpet or not, I don't know. Whether it was discussed behind closed doors, but nothing ever really goes away, does it?
No, absolutely. I mean, you know, the divisions, as I say, this has been one of the most toxic conferences just because of the divisions between the two groups. You know, it wasn't done politely. It was done very viciously. I think it's going to be very difficult to paper over the cracks. So after this conference, we're going to have a boomerang. You know, this fight that happened very toxic at the conference will boomerang for the next year until the 2024 elections. It's not going to go away. It will continue, but outside the conference itself. So that's going to be the challenge for Cyril Ramaphosa. I mean, how is he going to paper over the cracks? How is he going to unite the party? Will he use his old unifying strategy? I mean, before the conference, his strategy was one of bringing both sides together by appointing both sides into his cabinet, giving both sides positions, intenders, and so on. And then it causes paralysis because you get some very incompetent people in your cabinet and you create a policy paralysis. Is that what he's going to do, or is he going to do what is necessary, fire some of your incompetent people, whether it is people in his side or people from his opponents, and then bring in fresh people in order to get execution fast and accelerate execution?
Unity is going to be an ongoing project, work in progress and hard work, but renewal might be something that's a little easier to do. Do you think by having new faces in the top 7, an expanded top 6, that was a good step towards that?
Obviously, I mean, the good thing is we have now women representation in that, top 7. And we also have, a very young, well, relatively young person who 42 years, the youngest person in that top 7 now. But I think that a renewal, the real deep renewal is going to be very difficult. Now, I'll just look, there's about 3 or 4 parts to renewal. Obviously, the first is to get your younger leaders, no, as I say, leaders with a capability and with management skills. So if you look at the top 7 and you look at the National Executive Committee, the top structure of the ANC, we didn't see that. There's been a lot of recycling of people who've been there or who haven't been spectacular in their jobs. And a lot of people were clouds over their heads, either because they were corrupt or because they were violent people sits there. So from their point of view, it's a disappointment. The other part of renewal is changing the party, the governance structure of the party. Changing the constitution of the ANC to align it with the country constitution, so that we don't have the issues as we saw at this conference where branches delegate their nominees to vote in a certain way, and then suddenly at a conference, the leaders, the provincial leaders, actually decide no, they're going to change. So renewal means changing that. And maybe the last one, which I think is much more important, but it hasn't been discussed, is the renewal where to allow every member to vote, not through their branches or not through delegations. And the veterans in 2017 made that suggestion at their consultative conference. But somehow that has never ever been discussed at a formal structure of the ANC.
And the technology is there. I mean, it's not terribly difficult to set it up. But obviously, there are processes which are processes. So, at the end of this, the president, has he got a definite mandate as a result of this vote? Is it a stronger one than ever before?
He got a very strong mandate. I mean, remember at a previous Nasrec conference where it was just under 200 votes, and the votes were given to him by Didi Mabuza at the time, at the last minute. Yeah, he's got an outright victory. He didn't have to lean on anybody. So he's got a good mandate from the branches, particularly in the context where some of the provincial leaders actually portrayed him, who pledged support, and then, they decided afterwards to backslide, to change. So he's got a good mandate from the branches. He knows now at a branch level, he's got strong support. So it's going to be very important for him now to act very quickly within the first 100 years. First 100 days. He really has to act. And first thing is about a cabinet. I mean, his allies are saying, no, he's not going to change his cabinet. He's not going to do the reshuffle. But it is urgent that he changes that cabinet, because a lot of deadwood, a lot of incompetence, a lot of corruption in that cabinet, and he really needs to refresh that cabinet.
And I would imagine the delegates that voted for him will want some of those people gone, because they would have felt some of those insults themselves, because this is somebody that they want, that they like, and to have him insulted and then still be at the table will be difficult for them to bear.
No, absolutely. I mean, obviously there's freedom of expression. We all have freedom of expression within a party and outside of party. So, we can have our view, we can criticize. But once you're in a cabinet of a government, you cannot insult the president publicly. Now, if the president accepts this kind of insults that he got in a run-up to this conference, and at the conference, it reduces his authority if he doesn't do anything, if he doesn't act. So if he now, post-conference, if he leaves these sort of critics who defamed him and who insulted him in their cabinet, his authority will be gone, absolutely gone. Not only inside their cabinet, his authority to make decisions, to execute, because those people ignore him and say, well, actually, he's not powerful enough. I can say and do what I want. I'm not going to cooperate. He's not going to fire me. And his supporters who voted for him will also be disappointed. They will say, but we've given you a mandate, a strong mandate. Why are you not acting?
Former President Jacob Zuma, I just left wondering a little bit about decorum that a former president should have. One looks at Kgalema Motlanthe, Thabo Mbeki, the way they comport themselves. And I wonder if it's going to be something on his legacy, that he arrived late and that he didn't stay for the president's final address.
I mean, the decision in 2007 by the ANC cadres at the time to vote Jacob Zuma president and then obviously for then at the second term, certainly I think in the long history of the ANC, that must have been the worst decision. And actually when the ANC breaks or when the ANC collapses and when the ANC loses power in 2024, the decision started in 2007. Not at this conference. The decision was made to end the reign and dominance of the ANC in 2007 by voting a character like Jacob Zuma. I think he's not going to go away either. He is going to be, just the nature of him, he is going to continue his attacks against Ramaphosa. He's going to continue to undermine, the leadership of Ramaphosa. And I think Ramaphosa will have to make the decision to move to suspend
Jacob Zuma.
Or expel Jacob Zuma.
I mean, would there be an appetite for that? Because, yes, people might be getting a little tired about some of the things that he's doing, but it's another ball game to expel someone of that stature.
Well, that is part of the renewal. A key part of the renewal strategy in any organization, not just in a political party, any organization, even if it's senior people, if you undermine the programs and the policies and the leader of an organization, you need to be dealt with, you need to be expelled. And because if Jacob Zuma is not expelled, and he continues on this trajectory, which he will, others is going to follow suit, so because it's like a symbol for, the defiance and undermining of the program of the ANC. And others follow him and they do exactly like he's doing.
All right, we've run out of time, but perhaps the final question. January 8th statement. I suppose in some ways it'll set up the party, but also set up Cyril Ramaphosa's presidency for the year ahead. Although it's a party one, there will be that sort of overhang into his job as state president. What does he need to say on January the 8th?
I mean, it's going to be important that he has to say that now that he's got a mandate, that he's going to deal with corruption decisively, not on the fringes, not wishy-washy, really serious, and take on ANC members and leaders who are at the top but who are corrupt. Secondly, he is going to bring in, at least into his cabinet, he's going to bring in, fresh ideas, new people, and so on. Look at the National Executive Committee. There's a couple of people that he can bring in into cabinet, younger, with fresh ideas, with energy, with competence. It's going to be quite important. Secondly, really has to deal with the state. I mean, the state has been failing. I mean, what was missing really at this conference was deployment as a policy. The ANC sort of abandoned deployment and the deployment committees at this conference and adopt a strategy of merit. So, but maybe the president could, in the January statement, say, look, we end deployment because it has led to the failure of the state. From now onwards in the state, there's going to be merit, there's going to be professionalism, we can get the best people because we need to change this country. We need to renew this country, we need to refresh not only the ANC, but our country, give people hope. And then for me, the last thing is on the energy, because it is undermining our economy. And again, so far, all of the ideas that's coming out of the ANC on energy, is either ideological, doesn't make sense, it is unscientific, unevidence-based, it's not going to resolve the issue. There was a proposal before of creating another state on energy. I mean, it's fantasy, it's ridiculous. So we really need much more real, practical, pragmatic strategy to deal with the energy crisis as quickly as possible.
Prof, it's always good talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so that was Professor William Gumede for the School of Governance at Wits University.